This is Dave with Taboo Customs. Today we wanted to do a little intro video on a new project that we've got going on in the shop. And that's going to be a 95 Cherokee that's going to get a 1-ton swap, a custom long arm front suspension, a Dana 300 installed behind the AW4, and then we're also going to install some MRAP seats in this Jeep. So let's take a look at the components. So we've got a pretty strong base for this build. It's a 95 Cherokee. It's one that the customer has been building for quite a while. He's got a lot of little modifications that he's made to this Jeep. However, pretty much I believe the drivetrain is still stock, so we still got the 4.0, the AW4, the 231. I believe it still also has the stock axles underneath it. So we've got a really strong base to start with. And for this, we'll actually be keeping the 4.0 and the AW4, but then we'll start swapping out from there once we start with the transfer case. So for the transfer case, we will be using a Jeep Dana 300. So we're putting this behind and we'll be adapting it to the AW4, which means we'll be changing out the input shaft. We'll have an adapter we'll have to put on it. And we will be using this in the passenger side drop configuration. So that's what's going to make this build a little bit different in that the Cherokee currently is a driver side drop. So we may have some things that we have to deal with as far as clearance with the body as we go to start to put this transfer case in. For the front axle, we'll be using a GM passenger side drop Dana 60. Now, based off of the paint on the lockouts, it looks like this probably came out of a Cup V. So this is probably an 80s-ish axle. This axle is completely stock right now. So we'll be doing a few upgrades to this axle. We'll be adding a Eaton Elocker, 513 gears, high steering system for the on top of the kingpins here, and a few other little changes to this axle as we start to put it in the Jeep. For the rear axle, we'll be using a 14-bolt axle. This one has already been under a Jeep, so it's been set up and they've gone through it quite a bit, I believe. They've installed 513 gears, and I'm pretty sure they've got an electric locker in here based off of the wires coming out of the housing. However, we'll still open it up and take a look and check and see what it looks like. They've got a little bit of a tube truss on it, a traction bar, and it's already got the pads on here for the leaf spring suspension. However, I'm pretty sure we're probably going to have to move these pads. I don't think they're at the right width. However, this axle is pretty much already set up for us. And now for something a little bit different is we'll be installing some MRAP seats in this Jeep. Now these came out of the military MRAPs. And the cool thing about these seats is that they've got a completely integrated harness system with retractors for all the belts except the submarine belt here. So it's pretty cool, and they work pretty well. The interesting thing about these seats is they weigh a ton. They're very heavy. It's probably due to some built-in armor underneath for protection for the troops riding in the MRAPs. But we'll be working on making sure that we get these seats, since they are an integrated harness seat, making sure that we get these seats tied into the Jeep so that we know that they won't come loose in case this Jeep were to ever roll. So as for the process we're going to go through with this Jeep, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on getting the transfer case swapped out. That way, whenever we start to do the front suspension, we know exactly what kind of clearance we're going to have with that transfer case, what kind of mounting we're going to need to set up. Then we're going to work on going ahead and getting the rear suspension set up, the rear axle set up. That's going to be the easier one, and then we'll go ahead and get this Jeep movable again at that point so we can flip it around. Then I'm going to start to work on the front suspension. And as I mentioned, the front suspension is going to be a custom long arm design suspension that I designed quite a few years ago whenever I built my Cherokee to start competing. And we've been using that Cherokee for over a decade now on that suspension. So it's performed very well for us, and we're going to use a similar design in this Jeep for the suspension arms and for the cross member that we put in. There might be some changes we have to make because my Jeep is a driver side drop where this is going to be a passenger side drop. So there'll be a few little things that might be different on this Jeep. And as we do that design, we're also going to be tying in and doing some sliders here along the bottom. Now when we do that, that's actually when we're going to be tying in our MRAP seats, because when we stiffen up this center section and do those sliders, we're going to tie the mounting for these seats to those sliders because it's going to be a very strong assembly throughout the center of this Jeep, and they'll be sufficient for holding those seats. So if this video interests you at all and you're interested in what we're doing here, you can get a hold of us at taboocustoms.com or you can get a hold of us on our Facebook page as well, and we'll try to answer any questions that you may have. Obviously, if you're interested in following this video, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Thanks.